Hello, and welcome to our program, Artist Talk Tools of the Trade. My name is Paloma Feliciano, and I am the Public Programs Educator at the Walters Art Museum. Today, I am joined by two wonderful jewelry artists, Mary Rybell and Earl Jones, who live and create here in Baltimore. They will present about their work and the tools they use, and then answer some questions from you, the audience. This program is inspired by the exhibition Betty Cooke, The Circle and the Line, on view at the Walters Art Museum through January 2nd, 2022. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that support for this program and the Walters Art Museum is made possible through the combined generosity of individual donors, foundations, corporations, and grants from the City of Baltimore, Maryland State Arts Council, citizens of Baltimore County, and Howard County Government and Howard County Arts Council. Please note that this program is being recorded and will be available on the museum's YouTube channel and Facebook page. Now on to the artists. Allow me to share with you a little bit about Mary Raivel and Earl Jones first. After years of being in a different field, Mary Raivel in 2010 began studying art jewelry and metalsmithing part-time at MICA and later at the Baltimore Jewelry Center. She fell in love with it and in 2015 became a full-time jewelry artist and metalsmith, selling limited production work in juried craft shows and galleries. More recently, she has focused on one-of-a-kind and conceptual work. Welcome, Mary.
Thanks.
Earl Jones began designing and making jewelry in the early 1970s. After earning a living as a carpenter, he began creating sculptures with found objects. Working in sculpture led him to building objects in copper, which then sparked an interest in using copper to make jewelry. In 2012, after years of experimenting with various techniques, Jones began making the jewelry he is now known for. His aesthetic is very minimal, and his approach to making is similarly minimal. Jones uses only one kind of hammer, in creating his earrings and only a handful of other tools. He creates his work out of his home studio and utilizes the studio rental program at the Baltimore Jewelry Center as well. In 2020, the American Craft Council awarded Jones the Society of North American Goldsmiths Award of Excellence in Jewelry and Metals. Welcome, Earl.
Hi.
Thank you both for being with us today. And now on to their presentations.
Hi, I'm Mary Raivel. Say thank you to the Walters Art Museum for inviting me to talk about my work and the tools I use to make it. I'm especially honored to do so as part of the programming for the Walters Betty Cooke exhibition, The Circle and the Line. It's a wonderful exhibition, and if you haven't seen it yet, I strongly encourage you to. It will be on view through January 2nd. I have long admired Betty's work and her journey as a pioneering female contemporary designer and art jeweler. Her story has continued to inspire me when I have moments of doubt. There was no established pathway or clear role model for Betty to follow when she decided she wanted to design, make, and sell contemporary art jewelry. But she had the courage to stay true to her artistic vision, to trust her instincts and strategies for getting her work out there, and the tenacity to stick with it. To give you some background on me, I started studying metalsmithing and art jewelry relatively late compared to many other professional jewelers. Though making art jewelry had been my passion since I was a small child, mainly painting and drawing, I was told I couldn't be a full-time artist or major in art in college because I had to be able to financially support myself when I graduated. So more than 25 years after college, I really missed making art. I had long been drawn to contemporary handmade jewelry, so I began taking evening classes in art jewelry and metalsmithing at the Maryland Institute College of Art, or MICA, at their jewelry center, which no longer exists. and then later the Baltimore Jewelry Center. I was immediately hooked. A few years later, I was accepted into the American Craft Council's ACC's Emerging Artist Program. A few months after that, I participated in my first ACC Baltimore show. Next. Um, After college, I really missed making art. I had long been drawn to contemporary handmade jewelry, so I began taking evening classes in art jewelry and metalsmithing at the Maryland Institute College of Art, or MICA, at their jewelry center, which no longer exists, and then later the Baltimore Jewelry Center. I was immediately hooked. A few years later, here are some examples of some limited production pieces. Um, Hi, I'm Baltimore ACC show. It was a really positive experience for me, and I discovered a welcoming and supportive community of artists there. Shortly after that, I took the plunge, quit my day job, and became a full-time jewelry artist. I began making limited production work and a few one-of-a-kind pieces for craft shows and galleries. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of some limited production pieces that I made in that time period. Next slide, please. And here are some examples of some one-of-a-kind pieces that I made during that period. So then in early 2019, I decided to take a craft show hiatus. I wanted more time to explore new ideas and make more one-of-a-kind pieces and conceptual work, which I had done a little of, but since I had been doing craft shows year-round, most of my time was being spent replenishing production work that had sold. Next slide, please. Hi, 19. I've made a smattering of limited production pieces. Next slide, please. But I've spent more time on one-of-a-kind and conceptual work. Next slide, please. Sometimes a conceptual or one-of-a-kind piece will inspire me to make a collection of pieces based on the original. Most recently, I've been making what I call puffy pieces, which are inspired in part by the insulate neck piece, which you can see in this slide. It's the one on the far left. Um, the puffy pieces were actually something I'd been thinking about for several years before I completed insulate in late 2019. And that insulate itself was inspired by the 1973 Norma Kamali's sleeping bag coat. But COVID-1.
Hello, folks. Apologies for the technical difficulties. We're going to restart the presentations in just a moment, and we thank you for your patience.
Thank you to the Walters Art Museum for inviting me to talk about my work and the tools I use to make it. I'm especially honored to do so as part of the programming for the Walters Betty Cooke exhibition, The Circle and the Line. It's a wonderful exhibition, and if you haven't seen it yet, I strongly encourage you to. It will be on view through January 2nd. I have long admired Betty's work and her journey as a pioneering female contemporary designer and art jeweler. Her story has continued to inspire me when I have moments of doubt. There was no established pathway or clear role model for Betty to follow when she decided she wanted to design, make, and sell contemporary art jewelry, but she had the courage to stay true to her artistic vision, to trust her instincts and strategies for getting her work out there, and the tenacity to stick with it. To give you some background on me, I started studying metalsmithing and art jewelry relatively late compared to many other professional jewelers. Though making art jewelry had been my passion since I was a small child, mainly painting and drawing, I was told I couldn't be a full-time artist or major in art in college because I had to be able to financially support myself when I graduated. So, more than 25 years after college, I really missed making art. I had long been drawn to contemporary handmade jewelry, so I began taking evening classes in art jewelry and metalsmithing at the Maryland Institute College of Art, or MICA, at their Jewelry Center, which no longer exists, and then later the Baltimore Jewelry Center. I was immediately hooked. A few years later, I was accepted into the American Craft Council's ACC's Emerging Artist Program. A few months after that, I participated in my first ACC Baltimore show. Um, Next slide, please. So these are examples of two pieces that I made for that first Baltimore ACC show. It was a really positive experience for me, and I discovered a welcoming and supportive community of artists there. Shortly after that, I took the plunge, quit my day job, and became a full-time jewelry artist. I began making limited production work and a few one-of-a-kind pieces for craft shows and galleries. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of some limited production pieces that I made in that time period. Next slide, please. And here are some examples of some one-of-a-kind pieces that I made during that period. So then in early 2019, I decided to take a craft show hiatus. I wanted more time to explore new ideas and make more one-of-a-kind pieces and conceptual work, which I had done a little of, but since I had been doing craft shows year-round, most of my time was being spent replenishing production work that had sold. Next slide, please. Here are two conceptual pieces that I did manage to make during that time. Since 2019, I've made a smattering of limited production pieces. Next slide, please. But I've spent more time on one-of-a-kind and conceptual work. Next slide, please. Sometimes a conceptual or one-of-a-kind piece will inspire me to make. I've been making, which are inspired in part by the insulate neck piece, which you can see in this slide. It's the one on the far left. Um, the puffy pieces were actually something I'd been thinking about for several years before I completed insulate, inspired by the 1973 Norma Kamali's sleeping bag coat. But COVID one made me want to explore puffy jewelry further. I was feeling the need for comfort and protection, and I think of the puffy pieces as comfort jewelry. Next slide, please. So here are some of my most recent collection of puffy pieces. In the first piece, you see the puffy component with anodized titanium, and same for the second piece, it's anodized titanium. And in the third piece on the far right, that is sterling silver with the puffy piece. Um, I'm also continuing to work on a series of pieces looking at age and ageism that grew out of a workshop at Haystack Mountain School of Craft in 2019 and continued at the Penland School of Craft winter residency in early 2020 and has gathered steam actually again over the last several months. Next slide, please. So here are some initial exploratory pieces that I made for that project. So let's get on to the tools. As you can see, my work has varied a lot over the past several years in terms of materials and techniques. So that means I've used different tools depending mainly on whether the materials are traditional, like metal, or non-traditional. In terms of traditional materials and tools, I've used silver, bronze, brass, and rarely gold, and most recently titanium and niobium. I work with these metals both in sheet and wire form using traditional jeweler's tools like those on display as part of the Walters exhibition on Betty Cooke, The Circle and the Line. Next slide, please. I use a jeweler's saw to cut and pierce out metal, and you can see the jeweler's saw in the middle of that slide towards the bottom. I use hammers, mallets, anvils, and steel blocks to form and forge sheet metal and wire, or to rivet them together. And you can see those in the other two pictures. On the left, there's a giant anvil, and there's a tiny little anvil on top of it. And uh, the picture on the far right shares hammers and mallets and steel blocks. Next slide, please. I use a torch to solder or weld metal together because my preferred type of jewelry making is fabrication. Um, that means I'm either soldering or riveting metal most of the time. So here's these are actually two torches on the left that they have at the Baltimore Jewelry Center that I use often. One is an acetylene torch, and you can see the acetylene tank below it. And the other one next to it is a natural gas and oxygen torch that's connected to a natural gas system. And on the right, you can see someone soldering with that natural gas torch, soldering on an actual piece. Next slide, please. Um, so I also use files, sandpaper, and a flex shaft with various attachments for the many, many hours of finishing work. I would say the files and the sandpaper, and to a lesser extent, the flex shaft are what I use more than any other tool because finishing metal, for me anyway, takes forever. Um, the flex shaft, you can see an up close picture in the middle with some attachments. They're mainly like sanding and grinding attachments, but the other main function I use it for is to drill holes. You can use drill bits in the flex shaft. And then on the right, there's a picture that captures the motor for the flex shaft, but it's operated with a foot pedal. Um, Next slide, please. In my most recent Puffy collection, I also used some special equipment to anodize the titanium and niobium, which you saw in an earlier slide. So here's a picture of the anodizing equipment. The anodizing process involves exposing a reactive metal, such as titanium, to an electrical current while it's submerged in a special solution. And then when you change the voltage, that produces different colors in the metal. As you can see in the example, the test strip of titanium, the numbers there indicate the voltages, and the different colors correspond to those voltages. But sometimes I use unconventional tools with traditional materials. Next slide, please. Um, like this set of plexiglass mini mandrels. Mandrels are basically forms over which you conform metal sheet or wire to create various shapes. You can buy standard steel bracelet and ring mandrels, for example, but I designed this set of mandrels and had them cut out of plexiglass specifically to use in making the pieces in my ellipses series. And in this example, each of the 5 elliptical elements in this necklace on the left were made by forming a strip of metal sheet around one of the plexiglass mandrels on the right. Next slide, please. Um, and for each of the 2 elliptical components in this piece on the left, I actually stacked several mandrels on top of each other, and you can see those on the right, and then formed a metal strip around them that was as wide as the combined stacked mandrels. In both of these necklaces, once I formed the strip of metal sheet into the shape that I wanted around the mandrel with the help of a mallet, I soldered the ends of the metal strip together using a torch. In terms of non-traditional jewelry materials and tools, one example is the nylon fabric I sewed and stuffed with batting for the Puffy collection. When I use non-traditional materials, however, I usually pair them with metals. The next slide, please. So here you see um, the necklace on the right. Uh, the puffy fabric component is sandwiched between 2 pieces of titanium, and on the left, the puffy components are sandwiched between 2 pieces of sterling silver. And for both the earrings and the necklace, the 2 pieces of metal, front and back, with the puffy in between, are riveted together. And you can see the rivets easiest, I think, on the earrings on the right. There's a rivet in each corner. In other pieces, I've sewn the puffy components onto a sterling silver wire frame that I've soldered closed. Next slide, please. So that means I use a combination of traditional tools, such as a drill and hammer for riveting the 2 pieces of metal sheet together in the previous pieces, and a torch to solder sterling silver wire together to create the frame and to solder the sterling silver wire posts onto the frame in the case of these earrings you see on the left, as well as non-traditional materials such as a sewing machine or a needle and thread in making these puffy pieces. Next slide, please. I've used other non-traditional materials for production work, including spray paint, which you can see in the pendant on the left. Those are sterling silver elements, but inside each one of them I've spray painted, and that's what the color is. It's spray paint. Um, and then on the right is a brooch made of brass, but around the wires protruding out, I've used heat shrink tubing, which is a colorful plastic tubing used by electricians to insulate electrical wiring. Uh, Next slide, please. And for conceptual pieces, I've repurposed materials that directly relate to the narrative behind the work. So, for example, in the necklace on the left, I used a magnifying paperweight to explore age and ageism. In the piece on the far right, I used fabric and underwires from women's bras to honor underrecognized work by women. And in the piece in the middle, I used a piece of vintage Christmas tree skirt to commemorate a childhood experience in a school holiday pageant. In each of these in each of these pieces, I've once again paired the non-traditional materials with metal, and I've used traditional jeweler's tools to manipulate the metal. So hopefully, I've given you an idea of the tools and materials I use in making my jewelry. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at the end of the presentation by both Earl and me. So I'll hand it over to Earl now to talk about his work.
Hi, my name is Earl Jones, and I happen to be a metalsmith since the 60s, actually. Um, Actually, I started out as a found artist, which they call a recycler today, I guess. I took old things and turned them into new things because back then, most excursions and any sort of metal plates in the house was solid metal, mostly brass. There was a certain proud about. People were proud then, craftsmen and companies, and what they did, they made it so they would last a lifetime for the most part. Unfortunately, everything's about time and money today. So you don't get those things any longer unless you have real big pockets. Anyhow, in the 70s, I started making copper water fountains. I made them for stores, and that's when I first ran into Betty Cooke. She had the limited, which she still has till today, at Cross Keys. My customer there was Baycraft Limited. They sold burlwood tables from California, in which my fountains fit in real well. But what really fascinated me was Betty Cooke's show window. I don't remember if I ever went in the store not at this point. But her work was so simplistic and monumental at the same time. It left an impression on me that lasts a lifetime, which I didn't realize it. I saw her work in Georgetown in an old auction house brochures from out of California. There's a Betty Cooke Drive down in Great Falls, Virginia. I don't know if it's named after her or not, but it is interesting. I hope that the things that I'm going to show you that I do, you might want to become a metalsmith as well. Anyway, I'm going to show you a couple of things that I've done. And these are after 40 years of producing jewelry by a lost wax process of casting. I went back to simplicity and minimalist. Mainly what I produce today is earrings. This here is a sample of one. With me. I hope you can see it. There it is. Oh, I need something. Let me show something that's a little darker so it'll stand out. I'm sorry. Well, let's see how that looks. Well, it's almost there. This is made of 100% copper. It's all hand forged. I use very simplistic tools. Matter of fact, these are my original scissors that I got from Walmart. These are jeweler's files that I use for filing the shapes of the copper down after from these. This here is, this is a powerful little hammer. This is a jeweler's hammer, actually. And it's one of the new day ones. I tried to find another one and I can't. This one, I actually use it along with a steel block like this. I use it to give it, once I cut the shape out, I use it to give it a ball peen texture. See if I can make it shiny. There it is. You can see the hammer textured on it. Once I do that, then that piece is flattened out. With a big mallet. Now this is called a dead mallet, simply because, I don't know if you can hear that or not, when you hit with this, it's filled with a lot of little round balls, so that when you hit a solid surface, this being your thing, it spreads out, but you don't feel the shock in your hands. Keeps you from getting carpal tunnel. And not only that, it keeps to have that bounce thing that a hammer can do from the shock of it hitting something solid. Just absorbs it and spreads it out. So when you hit a piece like this, it spreads it out pretty flat. Then I take you from a step like that to the magic. Take it back color again. If you see that color tone in there. Now this and this, these are the same thing, metal-wise. This is copper, and this is copper, same exact copper. The difference is the torch that you saw in Murray's presentation. I use the same torches to give this copper the patina that it has. This is all natural. This here is done by heating the copper until the color gets to a certain point. Now, in doing so, you'll never see the color. You have to get accustomed to your eyes watching the brightness of the metal, from chill color to bright red, the layers of color, layers of heat, to understand where you are. And once you figure you've reached that point of beauty, then you do immediate quench. And in that quench is where you lock in the color. Now that there, I must say, takes a real talent after a period of time. Because even when I stop for a couple of months, I'll start again and I'll do it. But I never get back to where I was for some reason. I don't know why. But it's a wonderful thing because that color is what makes each piece an original. Even in doing them in pairs, which I do, you cannot make two earrings that are identical, but they're very close. And then after that, they get so soft. That's when you really use the rubber mallets, because the dead blow hammer, I'll put it that way, because that's what takes the bean texture, which actually, it actually puts that little bead on top of the metal where it knocks it through. So once you heat it, and it's still is soft and the color is right, and you take the rubber mallet actually distresses the metal even more. It'll spread it back in the opposite direction. And sometimes it'll even cause the painting texture to form circles on that side of the metal as well, which is really, really nice when it happens. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it adds to the design. So actually, when you take the torch into your hand, you're in the preliminary stages of actually working with the colors. Prior to that is strictly overall design, shape. So once that's done, and you reinforce the metal, it never gets as hard, but it'll be firm. Then it gets coated with 4 coats of lacquer, and then I'll use something, a pair of pliers here, to shape the ear wires, which are hyperallergenic, stainless steel gold plated. Now the gold is gold tone, not carat gold. And these are shaped so that you can get them on the little hole that you actually drill in it. I usually drill 1/16 of an inch because that's the size of the ear wires. And with wear, they will loosen up a lot. They're never really tight, but it's close. So when you finish, and I've made a lot of earrings in my day, but I tell you, they're still there every now and then. A pair will jump out at you and say, "Look at me, ain't I special?" And they would be like nothing you've ever done before. So it's a real fulfilling thing, especially when you can take this little bit of things, except for the torture, the other little things you need. But you can take it and basically sit in any drawer in your kitchen cabinets, and you got a jeweler's shop right there, and you can produce stuff, if no more than a wear for yourself. And they're so simplistic, so you can make it as complicated as you want. I've done pieces, and still do, that appear as I used a jeweler's saw initially. But when you start doing production work, you need more than 2 pair. You need to be able to produce them. So I designed a machine that would cut them for me when I uploaded the design to it. And that made it a whole lot easier. Now that I got, well, maybe arthritis, carpal tunnel, I don't know. But I can't work the way I used to. Anyway, I could go on forever, but I just wanted to present it to you because I've done a lot of shows, and people tell me how they have no talent. Everybody has talent. You just need something that you want to pursue. That's all. So I thank you all for coming out to this show. It's an excellent show, and I'm glad I could share a little bit of me with you as well. Thank you so much. Talk to you in a minute for the Q&A. Yeah, that was nice. I like that. I didn't know I was in such bad shape, but I enjoyed that. Yeah. Okay.
I think
Mm,
we're ready to take questions now. I don't know if
mm,
Paloma wanted to say anything,
mm.
um,
It's fine with
but
me.
feel free to put any questions you may have in the comments. Um, I will say thank you, Carrie Ann and Maria and Rose, for the hellos and the encouragement. Rose said, uh, she loved one of my necklaces, and
Mm,
Maria Earl Maria said, "You get the most amazing colors, Earl."
Thank you.
She said it was magic,
It
which I agree.
is. Me too.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions yet. So, Earl, can
Yeah.
I ask you a question?
Sure, go ahead. I'm just
Um,
sitting here.
yeah, I know. So you were talking about the um the mallet that has the little balls in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I'm fascinated by that, and I actually that's the first I've heard of this type of
Really?
mallet. Yeah, and I now I want one. I think
Oh,
it sounds amazing. And
oh, shoot.
what's the name of what is that mallet called?
Yeah, well, dead blow hammer, but
Diplo?
dead, D-A-D.
Okay.
Dead like it died. But you know what? They come in all sizes.
Okay. And they take the pounding out of it a
You
little
know,
bit, like they're easier on your arm and your hand.
they'll do better than any rubber mallet. I got meathead mallets. I got all kinds. Nothing beats a dead blow
Wow.
because you can get them. I guess you can get them up to about 5 pounds,
Wow.
and I don't care how hard you hit it, you won't feel a thing.
That's
But
great.
now that one is either the smallest or next to the smallest.
Mhm.
But just go to Harbor Freight and pick up the one you like.
Okay.
They got them all. I last time I bought them, I must have bought about 5 of them. They only cost like $1 and something.
Oh my.
So I just bought them. So I put one in. I don't have to think about it. Just grab it. There's probably one at the Jewelry Center. I bought separate tools for that. So I have to carry that stuff all the time.
Well, thank you. And actually, speaking of the jewelry center, Shane also just said that she wanted to know about the mallet too. So maybe that is something that will turn up at the jewelry center.
Yeah. I,
um,
You ain't got to worry about it. I'm going to check with her when I get there. She can check it. I'll get them and bring them to the center. They don't cost nothing. I brought mine because I figured they don't need them. But once you got it, you don't want nothing else. And the thing about it, after you beat them for years, the urethane gets it doesn't have as nice of a blow. So you
yeah,
spend another $1 or something.
right.
I don't know what that ain't $1, but it's cheaper than going to have something at lunch. I tell you that. You
Yeah,
can't. But the key
sounds like it.
is getting one that you feel comfortable with.
Oh,
See,
good.
I don't want it to be too heavy because I may work on it for 8 hours straight.
Right. Oh my gosh.
So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, when I work, I work. I got orders now from the JCC show when we were there last. They never got filled. Customers still want them.
Mhm.
And it's thousands of dollars, but I can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that hammer ain't no problem. But go to Harbor Freight, you know where they are,
Yeah. Yeah. I will
and
do
it,
that.
and they'll be there last stacked up together, and pick one that you feel comfortable with.
Well, thank you. And you also, I was going to ask you to tell us more about. You mentioned that you designed a machine that cuts out your earrings, and Shane also said something about that you've mentioned modifying machines in order to
Oh
make your
yeah,
production work. I'm
oh
guessing
yeah.
maybe she's talking about that, or maybe that's something else. But
Well, ain't no telling, but see, I had my own factory, and I built most of the machinery because when you got a need, you need a machine. So I get excited about machines. Whenever I put a new machine in the shop, everybody want to run that one.
mhm,
But I take the problems out if I can, because the bottom line is the finished item. And people talk about mechanization like they do art, photography and stuff, you know. You
mhm,
can't, people have creativity you can't buy, but you can buy tools to make creativity. So I don't hear all that other stuff that people are talking about, but I let them know this earring you see, I may make 10,000 of them, but you'll be the only ones with that color because the
wow,
colors I can't reproduce.
right, right. You can't predict what the torch is going to
No,
bring out. Yeah.
I'll be in the neighborhood and it might look identical, but it's never identical.
Mhm. Right.
But the shape I make them perfect, they're all identical. I can make it any size you want.
Mhm. Well, and speaking of that, Teresa Sato asked you what inspires the shapes of the earrings that you design.
Everything, everything.
Mhm.
When I walk around, I might see a water stain on a table. God bless the camera. I can shoot a picture of it. Now, by the time I get to it, I won't know what I was doing. But there's cracks in the sidewalks, tree bark, the way people's clothes laid away. Design is constant. You can't get away from it. It doesn't have to be defined so your brain understands it. What it did and what it does need to be is interesting.
Right.
Because you may see a design as big as a house, but there's only a corner of it that you want to make into an earring.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
when I take that picture, that corner, if I get to it the same day, I'll design it. But if I don't, and I got thousands of photographs that I probably won't ever get to, because what I do make, I make, I make what is it, 200 pair earrings, either that or 100 pair, I can't remember now, in about 4 or 5 different sizes. I've never had to do more than that,
Mhm.
and I still can't make those enough.
Yeah.
So when do I?
So we have a question from Allison Gulick.
Yes,
She asked both of us where can we see your respective work in person. um, I will say for me, my work is at Metal Shop, which is the retail component at the Baltimore Jewelry Center here in Baltimore. I also currently have a small collection at Quirk Gallery in Richmond, Virginia. I have some pieces in California, two places in California, at the Museum of Craft and Design gift shop and at the um, Palm Springs Art Museum Architectural Center store. Um, and that's all for now. I know, Earl, you have your work in a million places, so maybe you can just sort of get list a few, you know.
well, I don't know where she's from, but
Allison is right here in Baltimore. She's
oh,
a new she works for the Baltimore Jewelry Center. She just started working.
the
Uh,
BMA,
yeah.
BMA.
That's right. Your work is at the BMA
I've
shop.
been, they've been, my work has been in there for about 4 years,
Mhm.
maybe longer. They just acquired two of my brooches from Lost Wax Casting for their permanent collection.
That's right. Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'll live on when I'm not living anymore.
That's true.
It's a big honor, I tell you. to get to any matter of fact, yesterday was my birthday. I'm 70 years old.
Oh, well, happy birthday, Earl.
Yeah. So, like to get to, that's why I cried so hard at the convention center. To spend all your life, basically sitting on your front steps, really. And then to get national recognition in that sense of national organization.
Right.
It's mind boggling. You say, well, who's been looking over your shoulder? So I'm still in awe. I don't know if I'll ever come down because I'm
Er,
sitting there. How do you know?
yeah.
But there, and you can check my website. It's old, but if you want to know something current, I got a ton of stores that never made it that far. I can send you a list of them and
Okay.
museums.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. So, Mary Fussell, who is also here in Baltimore, asks, is there an unusual material that either of you would like to use that you haven't tried yet? Um, Earl, do you have any material that you'd like to use, an unusual material that you'd like to use that you haven't tried yet?
Well, not really. Not for what I do now. I've never worked in platinum, and I've always been told by fine jewelers that you would love it. It's like cutting in butter. But see, I couldn't cast it because it was like stainless steel, temperature wise. It required different machinery for
Mm-hmm.
everything. But I don't think I've even held a piece of platinum that I knew. I've done filigree reproductions for like people who wanted an old ring because I could cast your fingerprint. I was pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And but no, I'm fascinated with copper at this point. I worked in all kinds of gold and color,
Mm-hmm.
but there's nothing like copper. Nothing. Even bronze is not like copper. Bronze I
Right.
like second. Brass I do it, but because of the difference in the color, it's so tragic.
Mm-hmm.
But brass and bronze I love.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's not that I have never worked in it, but I've only tried a couple of times to incorporate wood. I haven't really done that much, so that's something I would like to learn more about, and so that I can use more about it. I'm working right now, experimenting with um, making molds of people's skin and using a casting material in that mold that's like clear. I guess it's kind of a clear plastic or clear resin. So far, I've just been experimenting with it. I haven't actually made anything from it. So I'd like to actually use that in a finished piece. Um, so you have some birthday congratulations from Maria. Hi. And Mary Fussell and David Dow says, happy birthday, Earl, and
Thank you,
congratulations.
thank you, thank you. Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. Oh, actually, and Rose Bloomberg says that the mallet the Deblo mallet that we were talking about would be good for her.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree, Rose. That would that would be good for you, and good for me. Good for pretty much
Oh,
anyone.
when you have it, you'll want to keep an extra one because you won't remember where you put it.
Yeah,
It's that useful. It's the perfect jeweler's tool.
yeah,
I mean, because it's hard to get metal level. Even when there's a certain temper to it, it can get you as level as you will get without giving you a reverse. See, a meat hammer or a wooden mallet is going to forge it the other way
hmm
because it's hard. But the urethane is going to keep it flat. Now, it may not take the temper out of it, but it can spread it out where it is.
yeah.
You'll love
Great.
it. It'd be the
Okay,
best money you spent.
I can't wait. I can't wait to try it. I don't see any other questions or comments. So I guess we'll just hand it back to Paloma. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, I enjoyed this.
Many thanks to our guests, Earl and Mary. Thank you both so much for being here with us today. And a big thank you to our digital team for producing this program. A bigger thank you to you, the audience, for sharing this experience with us. And we welcome you back for more programs on our social platforms. For upcoming programming, including artist talks, curatorial lectures, performances, and more, please visit our website at thewalters.org. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Earl and Mary.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.